Hello and welcome to the final episode of our series entitled Infinite Insights via Data as a Service with AWS. My name is Alex Hilton. It's my pleasure to be your host and moderator for this discussion. This is a series where our expert thought leaders and analysts have explored business transformation over 2021, covering subjects such as cloud adoption for SAP and IoT. And in fact, in today's episode, we'll be discussing data as a service and its position in the digital economy. Today, I'm joined by Jit, Chris, Rajan, and Holger. Give everybody a wave, gents. Excellent. Everything's working as it should be. That's a good sign. I'll just ask each of you to introduce yourselves individually. I'll prompt that in a second. And then Holger's going to have a little talk and presentation for us. So, Jit, do you want to go first? Introduce yourself. Tell us where you are at the moment, all those exciting things.
Hey, sure. Thanks, Alex. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Good morning, folks. Wherever you're joining. I'm Jit and currently heading the data practice for LTI globally. And it's been 25 years in the data business, and it's very fascinating. Started with addition support systems to data warehouses to data lakes. And probably today we're going to touch upon the data as a service. I think it's been a fascinating journey, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys about my learnings and perspectives in this journey. Back to you, Alex.
Great to have you here. Thanks, Jit. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Hey, Alex. Good, thanks. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone from wherever you're watching. As Alex mentioned, my name's Chris Casey. I work with AWS. I've been here for about 3 years, and I look after business development globally for AWS Data Exchange. I've been with AWS for 3 years, as I mentioned, but been in the data business for more than 15 years, and super excited with today's topic and looking forward to the discussion.
Great stuff. Thanks, Chris. And hello, Rajan. How are you?
Hello, my name is Rajan. I'm an architect and I'm in the AWS CoE within the data analytics practice in LTI. I have over 20 years of experience on the technology side, grew up as a programmer, and I do work on variety of solution architecture for my multiple customers. And I'm quite excited to be part of this event, and that's about me.
Perfect. Great to have you here, Rajan. Thanks. And hello, Holger.
Hey everybody, welcome. Good to be here. Holger Mueller from Constellation Research, coming to you from America's finest city, San Diego. As you can see from my fake background, the weather normally is nicer, but today it's cloudy, right? Careful with the question of waving. My avatar can wave if you say wave, right? So it doesn't mean that's really me. I cover enterprise acceleration, how companies have to move faster, have to become more agile, and cover it in 2 areas. If you look at my work and research, don't be confused. It's in 2 areas. One is platforms, technology, next generation applications. We talk about it here, but you can't leave your people behind, so I also cover future of work. So I'm not schizophrenic, but I cover holistically enterprise acceleration.
Great. Looking forward to hearing from you in a second, Holger. Just as a reminder, any attendees viewing this now will receive an exclusive first access copy of Data as a Service enables Infinite Insights, a trends report, along with a chance to sign up for a Data as a Service assessment and discovery workshop by an expert. So look out for more information on that one. Meantime, I'm going to hand back to Holger. Looking forward to this, who's going to give us a keynote presentation. Holger, over to you.
Thank you. Very much looking forward to share with you what one of the most exciting topic of the days is, which is data as a service, powered by what I call Infinite Insights. You'll learn more about that and how the cloud really changes everything, unleashes the infinite capabilities of that. You see my contact information here if you want to follow us. So what is the era of infinite computing that we're in? Right, we're very familiar with the past where you would have to say, how big does a system have to be? How large does a system have to be sized? You didn't want to overpay for that server, for that mainframe, because it would be idling. You didn't want to underpay because you would have a bad customer and employee experience if you had that. And now we're in an era where sizing doesn't matter anymore, right? For the first time ever, enterprises can just consume computing capabilities as they need them, as they like them, and pay as they use and consume them. And that is the era of infinite computing, which changes things fundamentally in the space. Because if you look at it in the past, and this is what's happening between business technology and business best practices, in the past, technology capabilities would always lag behind what business best practices wanted, what business and people needed to be productive at their workplace. It was always a compromise. The UI was not intuitive. We have to use the QWERTY keyboard, which, by the way, is designed for us to keep typing slowly if you're a dedicated data entry person. So that's how the anachronistically technologies that we're using. Battery life wouldn't last so long. Oops, I think we haven't solved battery life fully yet. So, but something interesting happened where for the first time technology capabilities overtook what business best practices wanted to have. And that created 4 phases. I mentioned the legacy phase of finite computing before. With infinite computing, we enter an inflection phase where for the first time, smart companies can do interesting things. And you know all the buzzwords around this, digital transformation and digital enablement and so on. And that created opportunity for companies to disrupt other companies, change markets, change the players, and then to catch up. Now, of course, we also had a little pandemic thrown into it, which changes how companies want to set up and operate. And it has become even clear that the cloud is the clear winner in a post-pandemic world because companies don't know how they want to operate. They cannot size their systems. They need infinite computing, and they want to pay, if they're doing well, more for IT. And if they don't do so well for whatever unfortunate reasons, they want to pay less for that. So keep this in mind, that infinite computing and technology capabilities go hand in hand and enable new disruptive capabilities and opportunities. So what enables this? It enables next generation applications, right? And one of the famous ones there, I don't spend much on those, we'll spend time on DaaS, is tame the internet, make sense of the internet, compute the internet for the very first time, something unthinkable in infinite areas. Revolutionize intra-enterprise function, how you work together in your value chain and make those things better. Data as a service, we spent most of time of this, one of the 7 next generation applications fueled by infinite computing. Orchestrate things. I was just tired of calling it IoT, but it basically is IoT. You don't know how to scale for that. Digitize value chain is the brother or sister, if you want, to intra-enterprise functions. It's about how you use your value chain, involve players, both on the supply side and on the demand side. And then there's significant ways, what we're practicing right now, reinventing communication. This service called StreamYard wouldn't be possible without the cloud in the background. You wouldn't be able to watch it from everywhere in the world. Example for a great change of that. And last but not least, innovate the human-machine interface. We can speak to our devices. Speech is a much more natural way of information gathering, information provision. All this is powered by the data mesh behind it, data capabilities, data as a service, and that relies on infinite computing. There's 5 layers to infinite computing. The first one, again, we experience right now, infinite connectivity. We're not worried from all the locations you're watching this right now that you cannot follow this presentation on StreamYard. Infinite insights, we'll talk about this. For the first time, companies can store everything they want without, and that's an important decision, the difference, without knowing what they want to analyze. So that's a significant difference to what you had in the data warehouse and similar technologies of the past. Infinite compute makes compute cheap. You can throw to it to run the next layer, infinite machine learning, or if you want to call it AI. And the last phase, which we're not yet there, but we're cusping, is deep learning, where software learns by itself. So let's get closer to DaaS. How does a modern data as a service platform look like? It takes care of the highest level of everything which is digitally available in your enterprise. The digital artifacts, those are the nice, polished, dedupe data quality system of record information that you see on the left side of the screen from ERP, CRM, HCM, but also the unstructured things, right? Chats from here are very well understood, emails, documents that are flowing around this event as an example, and they all have to go on the DaaS platform. And the digital exhaust, right? The things which you typically would not look on the right side, the logs, IoT information, social information, things that traditionally we could not measure, capture, all of that is economically available, commercially available to put in DaaS platform. And on top of that, you want to run partners which can analyze that information. So how does it logically look like, right? Not physically necessarily. There's operational data. If you look from the bottom, external data, data warehouses, which all form and put data into a virtual data layer. And here is the data mesh, right? For the first time, we need pointers. We need as many structures as we want, as many structures as we need to make this data mesh and virtual data layer working, where data might be physically residing inside of that operational data store, which is running in the cloud. Ideally, we talk about this in a second, or might be running locally, getting federated, getting virtually accepted. That's the capability of a modern data mesh. On top of that, of course, you don't want to hard code anything because data is constantly changing. You want to use modern API management, which allows for caching, security, and monitoring of that. And on top of that, all the way on top, as it should be, are the people, are the users, your customers, your partners, suppliers. So that's the logical view of a modern DaaS platform. really central, really critical element, the make or break, which you have to test thoroughly, which you have to look thoroughly into, is the data mesh and that virtual data layer. You have to look at it from an economic perspective. You have to look at it from an architecture perspective. It's the key thing which will power and fuel and decide about success, or maybe not so much success, of your data platform. So what should buyers think about when they look for infinite computing platforms, specifically in the DaaS area? Right? The most important thing is workload portability. You want to be building applications which make sense on top of that data mesh, but you want to be able not to be locked into specific infrastructures because you don't know if you're going to stay with those infrastructures forever. So you want to be able to have workload portability, those code assets which you have worked hard to deliver, which you've worked hard to use, you want to have them available about them. You have to look at the innovation speed of that provider. You don't want to be stuck on a cloud, on a data mesh, on a data infrastructure, on data as a service with, say, a cloud vendor who doesn't even speak about data as a service, right? But then you just want to take them at a point of time. You need to look at what have they done the last 2-3 years? What does their roadmap look like? Very strong point to always look at the roadmap. Traditionally, cloud vendors have not been very eager to do this. They're coming around. They're understanding that's an important thing for enterprise to make buying decisions. But for you, the important thing is to assess, is this vendor innovating fast enough? Because here's a secret, which I don't even put in the slide. The speed of the platform that you're on determines the speed that your enterprise can run on. And speed is all of the essence in a post-pandemic world and in general. Third criteria, portfolio identicality. For you to be able to run those workload assets, those capabilities you build on top of DaaS, you want to have the same portfolio being available of capabilities and technologies that both potentially on different clouds and of course on premises, because you never know where that workload needs to run from data sovereignty determination, from a data residency perspective, from somebody saying, hey, we need all our data in Russia, which is not a hypothetical example, but a real example for enterprise. So you want to have identical portfolios. You want to have advanced service offerings, both from the vendor of the platform to help you manage it. You don't want to spend time with the plumbing of that. You want to spend time with the insight you can derive from the platform. You want to have advanced service offerings from partners who've been building around those platforms. And luckily, pretty much all the cloud platforms have a very strong and thriving partner system to help you with that. You want to have a single pane of glass. It's way too hard for you to administer everything which is running there. Those systems are super complex, become very quickly the famous spaghetti ball where you move one thing and don't use the other thing. So you need and you must have a single pane of glass to manage those. And last but not least, you want to have elastic commercial terms. Let me spend a little time about this. This means that you don't only want to have the architectural flexibility, right, which manifests itself with the elasticity, right? You can scale more, you can scale less, you don't have to size things, right? Infinite computing is all about it. But what is very, very clear, you have to look at the commercial side of things and see that you really are in the situation to exploit that architectural elasticity, which means you pay less when you use less, and you pay more when you use more. And many of the providers are very flexible to make you pay more when you use more, but they don't want to pull back necessarily of you paying less when you use less. So make sure that the contracts allow for that. It's also a very good test that your provider is a true cloud vendor and is not running something by themselves where they have to pony up the CapEx, so they have less flexibility for you to go down when you want to spend less if you have to spend less. So the most important thing, data as a service enabled by infinite computing. The practical thing is the data mesh, but you have to keep the end goal in mind, which is to make your company become more agile, become faster, and practice enterprise acceleration. And that's my keynote. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Holger. Fascinating. Just as we're waiting for everybody to join back, it was music to my ears. I even wrote it down to here as the chief exec of the Cloud Industry Forum. So clearly, cloud advocacy is front of my mind. Cloud is the clear winner in the post-pandemic world. There you go. I've got a quote there. So thanks for that. Really interesting insights there. I'm sure everybody will have comments or questions around that as we go through the discussions now. But let's really get into, I guess, our own Q&A here. Jit and Chris, I'm going to come to you first, maybe Jit initially on this one. With my first question to you is really, how, Jit, are companies using data today, and indeed why is the evolution of data as a service significant to the digital economy? Jit, love to get your views first, and then over to Chris on that as well.
Hey, thanks, Alex. As Holger talked about before going into the question, I'll give a quick perspective about, as being in every organization now want to talk about all the buzzwords Holger mentioned about data-driven organization, etc. I think one of the fundamental things is about historically organization use data just to take care of their basic reporting. And as you see today, there are many companies at different levels of maturity. The way they're using the data is still in many pockets of excellence. If I have to say that, probably organizations solve, some of the organizations solve an enterprise data lakes or solving the internal data problems. And a lot of companies are still having it to deal with the siloed level of data they have. And of course, over the years, there are many ways people are trying to solve the problem with how do we consolidate, how do we curate. The focus was more about, how do I get together the data than more about how do I use the data to get insights. And even then, it was more of internal. Now, from there, over a period of time, I think organizations started using the syndicated data or maybe an external data. But again, the question is about getting all of them into the common repositories and start using them. So if you look at it, it's by and large is constrained by the technology, by and large constrained by the storage, and by and large constrained by many of them. I'm sure this must be familiar irrespective of the industry you're working, maybe exception to some of the tech players and others, but large organizations are going through this transformation. So to be specific, I think one way, while there were many bad reasons for the pandemic, but also pandemic helped us to accelerate many pieces before even the digital, as the digital economy started picking up. So the way I would look at it at this point of time, organizations really wanted to talk about the speed and agility and velocity, as Holger talked about a few minutes back. But how do you get there? Do you want to really go back and start solving the problem in an old way, where you wanted to get all these pieces together and start planning, capacity planning, and start building these capabilities? That's not going to help from a digital economy. As we're talking about, it is about new business model, ability to get alternate data in no time, ability to connect with variables to we're just talking about art of possible, right? So in that context, it's super critical having an ability as a service as you go through. As an organization, global supply chains you're talking about, or you're talking about different capabilities that are coming together. How do you really address them? So unless you solve the problem of democratizing, decentralizing this as a mechanism with the data as a service, organizations' ability to play in the global scale with a competitive is a definitely big challenge. And I'm sure every organization want to be a digital organization, and data naturally became a heart and center of this. So that's where I see it's data has been prevalent, but I think the value of data probably people realize last few years more. And thanks to the technology capability, as we have seen in a few minutes back, the art of possible with technology has dramatically going up. And I think the congruence of all these pieces are helping us. So I see every organization is betting big time on this, but they're all at different levels of maturity.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jit. Chris, I'm going to come to you on this one. Jit's talked about the power of data these days, and the capabilities. We've heard all kinds of analogies, like data is the oil of the digital era, and all of these types of things. I don't know if you want to add on to what Jit was saying there in terms of the use of data today, and why data as a service is such a significant thing in our digitally transformative market that we're in now. It's a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what Jit was saying, and the way Holger teed this up, I think, is perfect. The cloud has enabled customers to build applications and run sophisticated machine learning much cheaper, better, and faster than they ever have before. But data, the actual exchanging of that data and finding and sourcing and then ultimately deriving insights from it, has lagged a little bit. But I think that's changing. That's changing very quickly. And to me, that's why data as a service is one of the most exciting evolutions and concepts that companies are really starting to embrace now. I think the way in which companies still have to, in certain instances, find, source, analyze, to procure, especially third-party data. I'm looking at it from that lens, let alone the internal silos that they have, maybe in terms of sharing data across their data lake. It's still very rudimentary, and ultimately, it's a real distraction. Because what the company is trying to do is derive insights from that data as fast as possible. And some of these legacy ways of going about procuring that data are still getting in the way. And so really what we've heard from our customers is they want to they want the process of finding, procuring, and then ultimately using data as seamless as it is for you to shop online today, as simple as that analogy might sound. And that's why we launched AWS Data Exchange 2 years ago, to really try and help customers with regard to that as one of those key components. I think, to summarize, or my perspective on what Holger was saying, this is one of the most exciting evolutions in business today, because it's democratizing knowledge, and data is a form of knowledge. And most importantly, if you do data as a service right, it makes that knowledge easily accessible to everyone across your organization, and it really empowers and allows those users to derive insights from data in ways in which that they might not have ever thought were possible, because of the things like infinite compute and infinite scalability of the cloud. So I believe the importance of being able to harness data as a service within your enterprise is going to be especially important for companies in the digital economy, because speed does disproportionately matter in business. And I think we're going to see a clear separation between companies that have embraced it and, most importantly, empowered their business units to embark on this journey and deliver results, and comparing those companies to the ones that maybe have been hesitant to embrace it, or have underinvested in their focus in this area.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's interesting. I'm just jotting down some notes as you're talking there. Really, really interesting insights. Chris, I'm going to stick with you for a second, if I may. It'd be great if you can add any more color around this one. I guess I try and always interested to, how do we kind of make this real? Is this, data as a service principle, is this really just for the biggest enterprise type of organizations with clearly vast amounts of data? What kind of verticals do you think can most benefit from data as a service and going into the future here?
Yeah, it's not just for the large enterprises, is the short answer, and it's probably easier to answer which verticals might not, because I don't think there's really any industry vertical that can't have a material benefit from data as a service, especially with the unprecedented amount of volume of data that's being produced and is available for analytics and machine learning. Whether you're an enterprise or a startup, if you're able to capture and derive insights from that data faster than the competition, you're going to put your customers at an advantage using your services. We've seen quite a wide array of examples across customers in different industries. For example, customers can use satellite imagery data and map that to aggregated people movement data today, and really they're using that to do everything from responding more efficiently to natural disasters, all the way through to better planning for urban development, as an example. There's another company we're working with called PG Ventures that is actually trying to solve a very specific and nuanced problem. They were trying to identify where there's risks in soil relocation from underground mining activities in Central Europe, and they're using that in combination with analytics and machine learning to help predict and hopefully prevent future mining collapses from coal mines that have closed. There's another example of a company, KKR, which is a 45-year-old investment company in financial services. They've got over $400 billion in assets under management, and they're using AWS Data Exchange as part of their data as a service strategy to put more data into their production systems faster to ultimately make better decisions for their customers. So we could continue to go on and on with the examples, but there's quite a wide array of commercial organizations, but also not-for-profits, startups, and public sector organizations that have been able to harness this technology to deliver insights for their consumers, constituents, or customers.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That's superb. It's just trying to add, it brings it kind of animates it, really, kind of brings it all to life. So that's really good. I don't know if you want to add anything into that in terms of your, experiences in terms of verticals or types of businesses that are using DaaS at the moment.
Yeah, I totally agree with Chris. I don't think there is any industry which is not going to be a consumer of that. It's a matter of time. They're not today. As we keep hearing about everyone talking about monetizing the data and making money out of it, I'm sure everyone has to figure out a mechanism. How do they bring value with the data, right? So keeping that in mind, I'll just add probably a couple more examples, while Chris covered most of them. If you think about from some of the segments like oil and gas or heavy manufacturing equipment organizations, in the past, ability to use the data from external sources and ability to exchange the data in a faster nature in the real time is not an option. Is not an opportunity for them for multiple reasons. One, probably today we are using the drones to take the entire image of the manufacturing facility, and in the real time getting that data using the capabilities of Exchange, and not just for that organization, but also sharing the data with the other parts, right? Not just the satellites, but you're putting your own drones. And that's helping significantly in terms of the maintenance of the organization, and also several spare parts and components. The entire value chain within the the manufacturing system is also getting the data. So the way I see is this is out of possible. Technically, in the past, it's not even possible to collect, but now today we're not just collecting, but real time we're exchanging this information and then start making a significant value out of it. And by the way, this is not just the operation efficiency, but this is also an ability to, across the supply chain, cut down the, the inefficiency that exists, and also in many places, reducing the casualties and improving the safety. I think that's probably a big portion. The second one I talk about, as you can think about probably from a different parts of the world, bringing more people into the financial inclusion. What I mean by financial inclusion is getting together the credit history of the people, understanding their payment behavior, and democratizing that for multiple channels. That's another major area I see a significant opportunity. People already started using, and that started making a lot more monetization. I think probably I'll summarize this and say this. I think the amount of alternate data sources has opened up a big amount of thinking for everyone. I think everyone started thinking about what else I can look at it, both for correlation, causation, then start doing that. So that's where I see data as a service is here to stay, and it's obviously a big game changer for organization.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Jit. Rajan and Holger, let me bring you to this. Rajan, I'm going to start with you on this one, if I may. You just need to unmute yourself just to mention that. What are the components that empower data as a service, do you believe, Rajan? Holger, you're welcome to comment on this as well.
Okay, thank you. So one of the important aspects of empowering the data as a service is a data mesh. So what exactly a data mesh? It is basically an architectural pattern that's built to address many of the issues that traditional data warehouses face currently. So what are the issues currently? So we all know that early on in the RDBMS days, people used to store data into a database, Oracle or Sybase or other databases, and they used to run reports. And as with more and more data coming in, then the need expanded to some analysis. And then we brought in Hadoop, data warehouse, and then the data lake. And with this, the ability to scale horizontally the space and also the compute increased. So more and more data keeps coming in. So with more and more data and with more velocity, people are asking for more analysis, insights, and also machine learning. So this puts a lot of stress on the existing data warehouse and a data lake. And a traditional data warehouse typically used to have a lot of pipelines, ETL pipelines, getting data from various sources, doing all the transformations, and then storing the data into different layers from where we run the reports. And this really adds to more and more stress and also the technical debt. So what exactly we need? We need a paradigm shift. So the need is for the organization to become more and more smarter. And we need to have the data decentralized. So what it means is that we need to identify clearly a domain and have it decentralized. Responsibilities clearly assigned by way of a data owner. So this data owner will be responsible for all the data that he is orchestrating and who he wanted to publish. So he has to make a clear security layer available. And through the security layer, those who can have access will be able to access it. So overall, a good governance, and where needed, this data has to be orchestrated and made available through a public marketplace, and external parties will also be able to access it. And in order for this data domain to be created in a decentralized manner, responsibilities has to be vested with the individual data owner, and he will be responsible for creating what are the various data sources that make up the final data, which is the data as a product, and what are the changes that he needs to be done on the data. Should the data need to come internally, or it has to come from an external source, and what changes need to be done, he has to decide. So everything has to be clearly defined, and the data owner will be responsible for taking all the decisions. So in short, we need a decentralized capability, more responsibilities assigned. And with more data being added to a domain, we need to have the ability to scale. And for scaling, we have the cloud. Cloud comes to the rescue. Cloud provides all the space cheaper, and also the ability to borrow infinite compute on demand, with the ability of EMR to provide the space just when the data processing is required. And once the data processing is done, we can just collapse the EMR and have the processed data made available. So all this infinite computing is made possible with the advent of cloud, and also the storage space becomes a lot cheaper. And so what data that is needed currently, we can keep it available on hot storage, and what data that is not needed but needed for historical reasons, or those that is not needed, we can move it to the cold storage. And if we design a domain like this with clearly well-defined responsibilities and layers, when the requirement expands, tomorrow we'll be able to seamlessly add new domain, new capabilities, and with clear responsibilities and the ability to orchestrate clearly and with a better governance. These are the essential key ingredients of a data mesh that basically powers the data as a service in tomorrow's world. And the data as a service is really growing. And in order for an organization to be well prepared, some of the key architectural aspects and important concepts are to be followed in order to face a better tomorrow.
That's really good, Rajan. Thank you. Some really interesting things in there. Holger, I don't know if you want to build on that in any way. That was pretty all-encompassing.
Excellent point by Rajan and earlier also. I think the important thing for companies to realize, you all of a sudden are in a data brokering, data licensing situation as well. So the DaaS platform has to support you in an easy and effective way to manage that, right? And to give you just an eye-opener, you talked about a couple of examples. The people space is near and close to my heart. You might not be thinking that you potentially are in the data as a service business, but let's assume just you have 1,500 people commuting into an office. Let's forget the data privacy aspects and so on. You create about 1 million travel data points per year. And as soon as you're in a 1 million data points for your entity for location part, you're clearly in the data as a service part where someone might be interested of licensing your commuter data, right? Make a much more prominent example also from the space. You're hiring a new employee and you want to know how much you pay for that job function in that place. Well, guess what? The largest payroll provider in the US, ADP, running on a data cloud, will tell you, if you're providing your own salary data to share that, will tell you what the prevailing wage range is for that worker. A very, very valuable, very important capability, which is here powered by data as a service. And the interesting thing is, you might say, I don't want to share this information, right? To give you a data point, out of the 32 million plus people ADP pays in North America, less than 2 or 3% of organizations have opted out of this. And anybody has come back who opted out after 2-3 months because data is so important. So being able to license your data in the platform is very important. Being able to broker your data and take it back is a very important DaaS capability. Powered, of course, by the data mesh and some valued applications on top.
Yeah, thanks, Holger. Chris, to turn to you, if I may. How does AWS's cloud infrastructure accelerate data as a service enablement? I guess this is your AWS plug here, Chris. Go on.
Holger and Rajan actually were already hitting the nail on the head with some of the things that we're really trying to do. If you compartmentalize it a little bit from the data exchange perspective, one of the things Holger touched on for companies that are generating or aggregating or curating their own data, one of the value propositions we're trying to bring with data exchange specifically is removing the need for them to build some of that undifferentiated heavy lifting that you have to be able to have as a piece of infrastructure to distribute your data to third parties. How do you store it? How do you create licenses for it? How do you bill for it if you want to commercialize it? And then ultimately, do you want to have a product and engineering team that are just managing that somewhat undifferentiated infrastructure, or do you want to focus on investing resources where you can highlight to potential consumers the unique insights that are from your data? And then on the data consumer side, if you're wanting to consume more and more data from more and more sources, it's a lot of work each time you want to plumb up to some other company's API to actually consume that third-party data into your AWS environment. And so subscribers or consumers of data that are using AWS Data Exchange can pick and choose from many different third parties. ADP is one of those third parties on Data Exchange today. But the technical experience of actually ingesting that data into their AWS environment is ubiquitous, and it's the same no matter what that third party is. So that, again, we're going back to the point we talked about at the start, is really shortening the time for those consumers of the data from ultimately procuring and sourcing it to actually deriving insights from it. There's two real world examples that I can share with this group, Alex. One is Yum Brands, and you might be more familiar with some of the actual restaurants that they operate in the US, like KFC and Pizza Hut and Taco Bell. But they've got 50,000 restaurants globally. And so they actually procured some of Foursquare's point of interest data from Data Exchange. So to Holger's point, there's a mass amount of data points there. Foursquare's data set is about 95 million data points. And Yum Brands are using that data to actually optimize their physical footprint of new restaurants that they have based on that points of interest data, and also to more natively integrate location into their app experience. So as their consumers shifted from going into a restaurant to buy some of their product to maybe ordering online through their app, the native experience that those consumers had through the app was continuing to be enhanced or involved using that location data. And then, if you move into the healthcare space, unfortunately, cancer is still one of the biggest causes of deaths around the world. And we had a large pharmaceutical company that was actually doing some research into a very specific type of ovarian cancer. They needed to consume terabytes of data from a third-party data provider, and they were able to do that from AWS Data Exchange in a matter of minutes, when that would have taken them hours via legacy delivery mechanisms they would have had used in the past. And so again, shortening that time to insights for both of those customers is really imperative. But the key point I wanted to land there is that Data Exchange just plays a part in that. In terms of the overall AWS ecosystem, customers are then able to consume that data in services that actually help them derive the insights, like Amazon Redshift or AWS Glue or Amazon Neptune, where they can actually analyze that data at scale and continuously use the updates of the data to create new insights and power their business applications.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Rajan, I'm going to turn to you on this question, and then Chris, you're welcome to input into it as well. Everybody's welcome to input into it. But one of my favorite topics at the moment is artificial intelligence and machine learning, and that and data are intrinsically linked, right? You can't put a paper between them, essentially. Rajan, what is the crucial role, or indeed value, that artificial intelligence and machine learning can play in this process, do you believe?
Okay, so we do have more and more data coming into a data warehouse, and we are creating variety of use cases with the built-in automation. And with this, there is a need for data-driven decisions, and this is basically going across many verticals. And with the volume of workloads, it is going to be impossible for humans to make all the decisions based on the huge data points before finally taking a decision. So what this means is we need to build automate all the process that typically a human would do. So which means that we need a kind of a machine learning model which is imparted with all the knowledge that typically a human would have by understanding the data and then making decisions. So here I would draw a simple example wherein we always we receive all phishing emails and false emails, and here we all know that the organization has a simple model wherein it's able to use a simple set of rules to determine whether the mail is really a genuine one or it's a spam one. So it uses this kind of rules to basically filter out the mails. So a similar example can be extended in the fraud detection, also in the banking industry, where there is huge amount of frauds happening. If by creating the trained machine learning models and imparting the models huge volume of data and using the appropriate algorithms, we should be able to have the model itself make a decision with some amount of error factor. But to the most part, the model itself should be able to make a decision whether this is this particular application, for example, is really a good one, and whether there are any issues with the kind of data that this customer is submitting for this particular loan application. This is one good example. And like this, if we create a model and continuously refresh it at regular intervals using most recent data, and also have the model pull the data from other types of services to enrich the data, we should be able to have the model do a lot of work which typically a human would do. So by imparting knowledge to a machine learning model and making it do the decisions that a typically human will do, will accelerate the overall workflow process and the ability to make decisions. And this is really going to help in the future. And the cloud definitely offers a lot of tools here. Once we create a model using the algorithm, the cloud is able to operationalize this model and then make it available for any other workflow process to have it accessible. And by connecting the machine learning model in a typical workflow, it should be possible for accelerating decisions for many of the common use cases surrounding fraud, which is one good example. And the similar example can be applied to multiple verticals also.
Thanks, Rajan. Chris, you're welcome to come back on that. I'd love to get your views. I guess also, more broadly, maybe stepping up to, 60,000 feet on this one as well, is AWS has been talking about AI, well, particularly AI, machine learning as well for some time now. What's the take-up like? What are businesses really now looking at this and deploying in a serious, significant way now, or is it still something that's just on the outskirts?
I don't think I would classify it as on the outskirts. I think there are more and more enterprises and different types of organizations that are really leveraging the vast variety and capabilities that AWS machine learning services offer them for various different use cases. I think Rajan hit the nail on the head, especially when the end outcome of the workload or business challenge that you're trying to solve is not necessarily clear, and you might need to run multiple scenarios to identify trends or patterns in the data. And so as you get to larger big data sets or disparate data sets where you're trying to identify commonalities in signals across those data sets, that's a pretty common use case that we see customers trying to leverage things like SageMaker to actually build and then ultimately run those machine learning models on. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a nascent space anymore. I think more and more customers have invested in that space and bringing capabilities in-house or leveraging partners to help them with that. And it's now starting to become more and more prevalent in maybe business units or business activities that previously, saw machine learning as a future state sort of North Star function that they might be able to incorporate.
Yeah, super. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. Holger, let me turn to you on this one, if I may. What are the key enablers in the implementation of data as a service?
Yeah, that's a great question. How to get going, basically, which companies ask themselves all the time, right? And typically you ask, well, what are the roles, what are the personas involved? And easy enough, right? Everything which is involved with data in the company. If you have a chief data officer, if you have database administrators, those are all key people constituents which play a role, and you have to get together to tie that together. But it all comes in the sense to realize that your data is an asset for the enterprise, right? So it changes the way how you can do business. It is an asset which you can barter to get more information from other third-party parts. It's something which you can sell and you can license, right? So that's where you need a lot of corporate buy-in, obviously, because companies and executive many boards are, first of all, skeptical towards the cloud. And let's be very clear, you cannot do this without a cloud. You cannot have the elasticity even by buying servers on premise and say there has to be more data. So in some organizations, you have to overcome the cloud concerns. Then there's the whole data breach concerns, what issues you can have, which have to be overcome in cloud skeptical and data skeptical organizations, but that's very feasible and possible to do, right? And then you need outside providers, right? Not every company is staffed to that. This is why LTI is doing this seminar, lots of choice of service providers to help you with. I think they showed that they understand the subject. So don't do this necessarily alone. And then the big question is, and I'm happy that Chris touched on it with SageMaker, right? We had all the saying about data being the new oil a few years ago. Luckily, the buzz phrase is gone. But the oil is also in the sense not so much about the data itself, but data is the key enabler for machine learning, AI, and ultimately deep learning, right? So to understand that in combination with the cloud, again, which provides the cheap compute to make these things affordable. It's very, very important that you provide these models, and those models which you provide from not just a data perspective, but from an AI perspective, are sustainable and can accommodate new insights. And we'll talk about the most important three things in a second about how to care of it. But I think that would be the recommendations around the implementation.
Yeah, thanks for that, Holger. I guess really my final question, you just touched on it there, Holger, is really I'd love to get from all of you actually the top three things organizations should consider when they're embarking on this data as a service journey. I guess the way I try and always frame this kind of final question, I try and do it in all the panel discussions that I'm involved with, is really your key takeaways. So it might be the top three things, it might be two, it might be five, I don't mind. But and as we go through the list of people talking, you might find you've got some overlap here as well. Jit, I'll come to you first, if I may, and then maybe Chris next. But love to get perspective from all four of you on those top 2, 3, 4 things that organizations should consider. Jit, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So Alex, I think this has been always the tough part when rubber hits the road, what we talk about. There is a technology available. There is an excitement and aspiration from everyone about getting into a data-driven organization or making money out of data. But the way I look at it is from an implementation perspective, as a service provider, my advice or my top 3 things could be, I mean, just picking up one, definitely, as you're trying to get more and more data and more data from different people when exchanging the information, data privacy and security has to be given enough importance. While there is a technology that is available, I would really put more emphasis to organization to start thinking about how do they do that part of it, whether the policies, procedures, and make it so seamless so that you can adopt more and more data sources and how it becomes easy for them. The second thing I would talk about is, while we make all these things available, I think the bigger question is about how do you make sure it's consumed by the end users, right? I think you're providing a capability, but I think within an enterprise, how do you make this accessible? So probably spending a good amount of, whether intuitively or capability and data literacy kind of a, opportunity for people. Because the many times we've seen in the past, there is a lot of data available, a lot of information available, but the consumption patterns is not as much as what you create as a business case, right? So I would definitely put enough emphasis on that also for organization to think about. The final one, which has been my favorite for several years, and it's been a holy grail, is about data quality. I think the important information, whether you are a part of this entire data brokerage, what Holger talked about, the biggest thing is about the quality of the data makes significant difference for you to make money, right? Imagine I'm the guy who's selling the data, and you're going to buy the data as long as it has enough quality. What I mean by quality, it is the right time, it has the right information, complete, XYZ, all the things, right? So I think data quality has to be given enough emphasis by organization while buying as well as selling part of this entire exchange of information in this data service. So while these are all sometimes sounds like probably the basics, but many a times people get excited in the implementation and then suddenly realize probably we're not generating enough value out of it. So I would put enough emphasis on the age-old data security, privacy, and data quality and data literacy kind of areas, Alex.
That's great. Thank you, Jit. Chris, let me turn to you on your list. Let's put it that way. Your takeaways.
Yeah, I have 2, Alex. I'm going to take you up on the offer that we don't need 3. And one's actually a nice segue from what Jit said. I agree in terms of the data quality side of things. It's something that can't just be glossed over when you're looking at this, because it can be garbage in, garbage out in the context of this conversation. What I would say is organizations shouldn't feel like they're alone in that space. We have AWS partners like Capgemini is a good example, who we've worked with as they've helped customers on their data as a service implementation strategies. And that spans not only data quality, but also how the organizations actually approach this from a change management perspective. And there is also companies that have actually specialized in helping customers turn what was unstructured or semi-unstructured data into structured data, so it's much more easily consumed either within their organization or externally. Companies like Clarify, who make their software available in the AWS marketplace, so someone can procure that too. So data quality is important, but you also shouldn't feel like you're on your own or on an island as an organization as you're trying to tackle that problem. The other thing that I would say, Alex, and for me, this is certainly one of the most important areas as it relates to this topic, especially as we've continued to emphasize in this talk around how speed disproportionately matters in this space, is sometimes small steps can lead to big changes in this space. And the risk organizations run is that they overanalyze a decision, or they feel like they have to commit the whole organization to a data as a service all-in strategy overnight. And the reality is that that's not actually what we saw with a lot of customers adopting the cloud early. What they did was they picked a project where the business unit was empowered to embrace this new technology. And maybe that project is something that's not seen as mission critical to the business right now, but it's something that you will be able to evidence value to the business quite easily at its completion, and let that center of excellence or those stakeholders run with it end to end. I think once organizations can have a successful project and showcase those results, it's much easier for the rest of the organization to see that and look to replicate it, rather than over-engineering a decision to start somewhere. So for me, like picking a project and empowering that business unit and the stakeholders on that project to truly go all in on leveraging data as a service is the most important thing to think about when you're starting on this journey.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm writing things down there. I enjoyed that. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. Rajan, I'd love to get your takeaways, your list, your things that people should consider when embarking on this journey. Rajan.
What I wanted to say is data as a service is the emerging topic, and it holds huge potential for the business. And there are a lot of small players that are coming into the market able to serve their data. So an organization has to be smarter to pull the right set of data from the right providers and be able to do a value-added service. So that way they are able to adapt to the market conditions, while at the same time have a smaller technical depth, and that way they'll be able to horizontally scale and be able to provide more data as a service and be responsible for its stakeholders.
That's great. Thank you, Rajan. And last but not least, Holger, you got the tricky one.
No worries. I mean, great points by the three gentlemen before me, all very good. Let me get out of the way. I use one of the extra ones from Chris, and we said already, you need a cloud for this, right? There's no question this will fail if you don't have a cloud on this. If you hear about the data swarms and data lakes, the reason is that these things were run on premises, companies were left alone, couldn't maintain them, couldn't get the insights and so on. So don't get disheartened by the bad news about data lakes and so on in the past. Right technology in the wrong place, not in the cloud. We also said don't do this alone, right? Chris made an example. We here with LTI. You have to complement those skills. There's things which you don't need forever. You don't need all the time. You might even operate it. So coming to the really three tangible ones, the first thing you need to look at is what's data gravity. Right, so more data attracts more data, moving around data, even AWS with the snowmobile, that's a nice and great solution. If you might have seen that, right, is a way of doing this, but it's hard to move data. So think about where the data will be. There's data egress costs, very, very important. But the most important thing is when people ask, when you embark in DaaS, what do you want to do? What do you want to analyze? Limiting your scope and what your user's data is highly not beneficial, because the value of data is in the synergy of the 2 + 2 is 5. And I always say, what's in one man's eye is trash, is gold in another man's eye, a woman's eye. It doesn't matter what the gender is, right? So take all the data, take all the digital artifacts, take all the digital exhaust. I'm in different camp, and don't quote me on this already, what Jit said, like data security and governance. You need to have a mindset when you do something new, like the Conquistador Cortez, right? Burn the ships at the beach, right? Not that he did great things and so on, but the mentality that you have to arrive and there's no way back and there's a one way, and it's going to be competition where you have to move faster. That is super crucial for enterprises to realize, right? And last but not least, you need to have the buy-in. You need to get going. I mean, SaaS is a household name, software as a service, PaaS, platform as a service, IaaS, infrastructure as a service, DaaS, data as a service needs to become a household name. So you need need to get going, build the experience on a topic which is not simple. It would be simple, everybody would be doing it, but it's a key concern for you to operate better, and it's also a key driver for your profitability. If you have the data and you can license those data, we predicted it will be 20% of your profitability stream if you do it right, because you have it anyway, and you can license it, and it might not be of value for you, but value of somebody else. So that would be the 3 points, and sorry, I stole one from Chris.
No, I think that's really good. That's some great insights from all 4 of you there. And I think, you know, I was speaking with a senior IT person a while ago who was describing that difficulty getting hold of money actually for projects, unless he was focused on revenue activities. To get revenue money for revenue focused activity is a much easier thing to do at the moment, because, you know, clearly the periods we've all been through.
But the beauty, Alex, to jump in, this is a profit making. That's even better than money making, because money making, you say, how profitable is this? And we have lots of opportunities, right? This is data that you have already, and people might be ready to pay for it, and you just need to get the infrastructure to license that data to them, right? So this is free profit, right? Even better than revenue. Sorry to jump in.
No, and you summarized the point I was making much better than I could. So I fully agree with that.
Sorry, I stole your thunder. Sorry.
No, not in the slightest. It's not my thunder. So listen, I want to thank all of you. Some really fascinating insights there. Just a reminder to all of you as attendees today, you get exclusive access to a copy of the Data as a Service Enables Infinite Insights report. So please look out for that. And you also get remember I talked at the start, a chance to sign up for DaaS assessment and discovery workshop as well. So I really encourage you to do that. All it leaves me to do is to thank you, Holger, Rajan, Chris, and Jit. Really, really fascinating insights. That's the last in the series, 3-part series we've been running, and I've enjoyed it thoroughly. So thank you to all 4 of you for your time and discussion today. Take care.